I really want to thank all of you for joining us for our first session here in this room today, the evolution of the 10 series. We're going to have some fun. We have a few speakers coming up, and we will have about 5 to 10 minutes here at the end of the presentation for Q&A. I would like to ask that you hold your questions until that section. I've got 2 microphones out on the floor. When we get up to that point, just head right on up. We'll get some nice lines going and work through those questions. This session will be running through 12 p.m. today, and when we break out, we'll be heading on to lunch. So without further ado, I would like to present the presenters for our session this morning. We've got Garrett Denny, Michael Devins, and Joe Bloom coming on stage. How about a round of applause?
Thanks, Jim. Thanks. Hey, good morning, everyone. So just to echo Jim, how are we doing this morning? Everybody feel good? Keynote was pretty cool? Okay, cool, great. Show of hands, first time at JNUC.
All right.
Holy cow, guys. Well done. Round of
welcome.
applause for you guys. That is awesome. That is really great. I think that's by far the most I've ever seen that go up in a room at JNUC. That's very, very cool. So to those of you that are here for the first time, welcome. My name is Garrett. I'm going to introduce kind of our whole speaking crew here in just a second as we walk through, of course, the history of the 10 series of Jamf Pro. So with that, why don't we just kind of dive in. As I said, Garrett, product marketing. I've got Michael Devins here. Michael, say hi. Product manager for Apple. And Joe Bloom. Joe, say hi. Also, senior manager of the product management team, and Joe oversees, of course, Jamf Pro. So we're all going to kind of walk through different bits and pieces of Jamf Pro today, but we'll begin with kind of a higher level look. So this is something that Dean echoed in the keynote. It's why are we doing what we're here to do? And it's not just technical. The technical pieces are, of course, a very big piece of this. We're going to dive in pretty deep and really get into the weeds. But we also want to take a step back and say, what are we trying to accomplish at Jamf as a whole? And I think, for 16 or 17 or 18 years, we've been driving towards something. And again, if you're brand new and you raised your hand just a minute ago, this is perfect. This is a really great slide for you because Jamf is not just about MDM. It's not just about tech. It actually has a kind of like a higher level purpose that Dean talks about quite a bit. So the purpose statement, how many of you have heard this before and seen this before? If you've been to JNUC, you've probably heard this. A few hands go up. This is actually really great. So this is brand new for a lot of us. We talk about this at least once a month at our all-hand meetings at Jamf. So Dean brings this up routinely all the time with every product release. Why do we come to work in the morning? Empowering people with technology that puts humans first. Now, below that, we have a mission statement, a little more tactical, helping organizations succeed with Apple. So, of course, it's tech on a high level. It's Apple specifically that we're here at JNUC to talk about today. So we have 3 themes that we're going to get into, again, into the weeds a little bit. Over the past 12 months, the roadmap has really centered around these 3 things. And if you read release notes, who's read release notes or followed our customer emails? Who's seen a customer email over the past 12 months? Great. Who was around for the release of 10.7? That was not that long ago. 10.6? 10.5? 4? 3? How about the 10 series debut last year? Phenomenal, about half the room. That's really great to see. So first of all, thanks for being with us for that journey of the 10 series. As we move through, these are the themes. So it's been very kind of nitty-gritty with each release, right? Every time a new release comes out, a dot release, we've got new features, functionality, support, of course, in the spring and fall for Apple releases. But these are the 3 things that over the arc of 2018, since we launched the 10 series, that we've really been driving toward with the evolution of this product. Now, how many of you, again, if you are brand new, you probably will not raise your hand, but how many of you have heard the concept of Jamf and? Maybe 20% of the room or so. That's really awesome. And again, if you're brand new, this is a perfect slide to kind of key off of why we're doing what we're doing. There are 2 key ways that we build on this idea of Jamf and. So Jamf, of course, a core provider, an MDM solution in Jamf Pro, but there are a lot of other opportunities to really extend that technology. We do it in 2 key ways. So first of all, the marketplace, and second of all, the developer portal. Now, in the Jamf ecosystem, these are 2 distinct concepts. The marketplace are completed solutions that are ready for you to take advantage of today. The developer portal on the other end of that spectrum, that's where you go if you really want to build something that hasn't been built before. If you're working for a company or on a solution or on a side project that's filling a gap that still exists. That's not something you see in the marketplace. You're doing it better than anybody else. You'll extend that Jamf reach to new places. So the marketplace, you'll see a screenshot on the screens right now. This is really a single source, a single location to find new tools, new integrations, new partners that are doing some really cool things, that they do that better than Jamf could ever hope to do. And that's really the power of that marketplace. Charles Edge, of course. How many of you know Charles? Really common name. Yeah, a lot of Charles fans in the room. Charles is with us. He is the head of the marketplace and developer relations. He's been doing a great job over the past year since the 10 series launched of really building this out and growing that marketplace. Now, 4 big logos, of course. You heard from a number of these folks in our opening keynote today. Nomad, of course, joining the Jamf family very, very recently here within about the past month. We are still supporting, we love to support the Nomad open source product. Any users of the open source product? We're just going to keep doing hands today. Okay, about 20%. That's great. And then, of course, the paid enterprise applications now part of Jamf Connect. Microsoft Intune, Okta, and Google also key partners in that marketplace. Now the developer portal, again, kind of shifting to the front end of that pipeline. This is really where you go if there's something brand new. You see a gap in your specific company, in your specific use case, and you want to be a part of that solution. And you might be on the vendor side, you might be on the integrator side, wherever that is, and wherever you sit in the entire ecosystem of the Jamf experience, that's where you go. It's kind of your single source for all of the documentation and support for how you build and eventually join that marketplace further down the pipe. Now, the final thing that I want to talk about, then I'm going to bring up the PMs. First, Michael's going to join us here on stage. The first thing is, of course, Apple, and this is at the core of our entire annual cadence. We look at the Apple releases in the spring, in the fall, and we key off of that. If you read our release notes, if you've been with us, like a lot of you were when those hands went up, since the launch of the 10 series last year, you've seen a number of these already. This is old news, you've been with us, and you see how, if I pull this up, we are very, very big on day 0 support at Jamf. This is something that stretches back a long way in our corporate timeline. It's very much a part of our ethos here. It's not just support for what Apple is doing. It's being right there on day 0, making sure that you are empowered to give your users the latest version of iOS, the latest version of macOS. And again, this goes beyond technology. This really goes beyond just support for those tech releases. This is a quality of life thing. And if we step outside of the IT admin mindset for a minute and we think about this, in the end user's hand, they have a device that they want running the latest and greatest version with the best features and the latest support from Apple. That's really the key, and it's why we put so much engineering time behind every one of these releases. Joe and Michael will talk about that more in just a minute here. The one thing I want to call out quickly is, of course, our support for Mojave, iOS 12, tvOS, a lot of new functionality under all of those banners. Again, check those release notes if you're saying, tvOS, what are you guys doing in that space? Talk to me after, talk to our PMs after, or take a look at release notes on docs.jamf.com. So with that, why don't I welcome Michael to the stage. Let's give him a round of applause. Let's welcome Michael up to the stage.
Okay. You get half of that applause. Thanks, Garrett. So I want to talk through a couple of components, starting with the user experience. When we think about our users, we have 2 distinct personas that we're serving at Jamf. One is the end user. That is actually part of that 11 million device population, or perhaps beyond, as you think about shared devices rotating through in different use cases. And then, of course, the IT administrator, the persona that's here sitting in this room. So when we think about it, 2 different filters for serving that end user. Of course, with version 10, we introduced a fully redesigned, rewritten from the ground up in Swift, Mac OS self-service application. Modern application, a totally refreshed interface for browsing that content, alternate display buttons, a unified download history integrating with the patch management workflow, and importantly, completely brandable, allowing you for the first time to elegantly, easily, and consistently deliver a more native experience. This is your tool, it's not ours, and with the branding capabilities, you can put in your logo, your company name, your header image across the top. We saw some examples of the customization in different organizations this morning as well. And this was a really big step forward in improving the experience of using self-service beyond just a web view, rendering that content in a native Swift application. Of course, the Mac OS application was one piece of the equation. The flip side of that is also the iOS, and you've seen some of the new capabilities, again, with big enhancements to the user experience, great advancements and improvements around accessibility, voiceover, making these applications more accessible for all end users, and a real refresh here. We'll continue to evolve both of these, but version 10 marked a new trajectory for both of these end user serving applications with Jamf Pro. Now, when we think about this audience, it's not too long ago that this is what you saw. It feels like a distant memory for anyone that was there. I know it does for me. But with being able to take Jamf to the 10 series, introducing that refresh of the interface, including a number of usability enhancements, not just natively in Jamf Pro as we continue to improve the functionality, but also what you saw today with Jamf Engage and the in-app guides, and the ways that with the more modern technologies in rendering our solution, we can actually provide better, richer experiences for you as an IT administrator. And a lot of work still we're continuing to do there, but a great step forward for Jamf Pro admins. Some of you may be using Jamf 1 in addition to the JNUC application and a number of other apps on your device, but Jamf 1, introduced over the last year, is the best way to stay connected with Jamf on the go. We continue to add capabilities to this application, allowing you to participate in the Jamf Nation community via a native iOS app. If you don't have it yet, I'd encourage you to check it out. We continue to add new capabilities, new ways to engage with the community with this native iOS app. The second piece that I want to talk about is it's a really big concept, and it's something you see a lot enumerated with our there is no step 3 concept, this posted. And really, what we do is help you provision devices. It's sort of the premise of our existence, right? It's how do we get something out of the box and in the right state for your end users? And so how are we empowering people, embracing Apple, and making those users powerful? We do that through provisioning workflows to make whatever your outcome is achievable and easy. A number of new capabilities have been added recently, just recapping some that we saw this morning as well. First, with the inventory preload. We know there are a lot of different ways you might interact with managing devices, especially in bulk. Some of you might use the JSS mass update utility or other API integrations. There are a number of ways to accomplish these workflows, maybe with multiple pre-stage enrollments and other things that, while possible, might add some complexity or some friction, might not be totally scalable for your workflow. And so with inventory preload, we're really excited to give some alternatives, some native first-party solutions to saying, I got a bunch of serial numbers and a bunch of inventory information that's going to drive my deployment, and just let me upload a file. Inventory preload really simplifies that. And as was mentioned this morning, this can be done not just for devices that are already under management, but as placeholder preloaded data for any devices that have not yet enrolled. So you could upload all of these rows of serial numbers that have yet to be enrolled, apply all the appropriate configurations to those devices, and know that that inventory is prepared even before a user enrolled, especially if you're doing non-authenticated enrollment, maybe a number of situations where it's more about shared or generic device deployments to buildings and schools, for instance. You can pre-assign that inventory information, a number of attributes with inventory preload. The other enhancement to that iOS provisioning story is around what colloquially a lot of people refer to the tech, the await device configured capability. The ability for a device coming through automated MDM enrollment, formerly DEP, Apple's Device Enrollment Program, to be able to say, okay, cool, you're coming in to enroll, hang tight for a sec, I'm going to deploy some stuff. I'm going to install any configuration profiles that are in scope, and I'm going to apply any wallpapers that might be scheduled for your device with the automated management capabilities of Jamf Pro. Similar to checking a box for supervise, you can check this new box to install those configuration profiles before Setup Assistant. This enables that await device configured workflow. And I'll point out this is available. This will be available in 10.9 for iOS and in an upcoming release for macOS. We are working on it. There's some additional complexity on the macOS side we need to solve for and make sure that it's an elegant workflow for you, because unlike iOS, which is pure MDM inventory, most of the inventory we collect on the Mac is actually done with our management framework and a recon, and that information comes later. So we can't hold up front on stuff we need later. So we're working through, it'll be a little bit more granular in the control you have there. This is coming to the Mac OS platform as well in an upcoming release. That's work that's underway. So I just wanted to point that out. Both of those really important to that whole provisioning experience for the end user. Also, in that same vein of await device configured tech, not only do we have the ability to install configuration profiles or wallpapers on iOS prior to going through Setup Assistant, prior to users seeing the home screen. We saw a great demo this morning of how we can use the install application, specifically the install enterprise application on Mojave, to install a package prior to Setup Assistant. Again, we're iterating through on this deployment, so a couple details. One is we'll support in 10.9 the ability to do what you saw this morning, which is install a package on a macOS Mojave machine, and that uses the install enterprise application tech, and that'll be in 10.9. In an upcoming release, we'll add support for install application for previous OSs as well, so they're coming, hang tight, and those releases are coming fast following, so you'll get that soon. But I just wanted to point that out in the way that we're leveraging that newer secure install enterprise application tech with Mojave. The other thing I want to point out is if you're using a Jamf Cloud distribution service, we'll actually generate the manifest on the fly and dynamically for you. So you just pick a package in JCDS and we take care of all of the rest. Though you do have the ability, if you want to append your own manifest for a different distribution service, you can absolutely do that as well. And then this feature on a macOS pre-stage allows you to add a package right here, and that actually gets queued even before the Jamf management framework. So really early in the process before you see the 3 checkboxes of success on the macOS setup assistant. Jamf Connect is obviously our forward-looking vision for where we think we can take that provisioning experience as it relates to integrating with those identity providers, especially doing the multi-factor SAML, being able to manage the login window without needing to bind, without needing VPN. Nomad solves a lot of these problems as well, depending on your workflows, but really emphasizing the importance of that whole entire workflow, specifically supporting Jamf Connect, which we'll have a lot more to say. There's a session about this later this week where we'll go in a bit more detail on Jamf Connect. Joel will share more information. I'd invite you to attend that if you're curious about what's up there. In healthcare, we've been doing a number of things, specifically putting iPads in the hands of patients. And of course, there's sort of this balance we need to maintain where to give someone a device and say, access your most sensitive data, your medical information on a device, but then also make sure that device is digitally sanitized between use cases. There was some really important technology pieces we needed to put in place before we can make that a reality without just staffing IT on every floor. And we've continued to build out capabilities of the Jamf Healthcare Listener, which extends the ability to integrate with your electronic medical record system. And when patient in room 201 discharges, we can automate the wipe of that iOS device and or Apple TV device. Importantly, as Apple's adding new keys, we can actually influence more of that re-provisioning experience, specifically here added in iOS 11.3, the ability to suppress the proximity setup. If a patient's not going to be on the Wi-Fi, I don't want to prompt them to join the Wi-Fi from their device. We just want to get right to the screen to pick Wi-Fi and go. So we can inform that healthcare listener capability with some of the new things that are added to iOS that even persist through a wipe to inform the next re-enrollment experience. Certificates, we're starting to blur between the user experience, creating a great user experience, and into the security section that Joel will talk about in a minute. But SCEP Proxy has been a really important piece of technology for Jamf to be able to tie into this flexible framework where we can integrate with your SCEP server directly, you keep that secure, and then we can be the source of delivery for all of those certificates to devices. So a really important integration that a lot of organizations have come to rely on. And we've also built out that certificate workflow by integrating with the Active Directory certificate services. Again, providing that proxy between ADCS and Jamf Pro so we can push down these other certificates and using that connector for ADCS. Again, this is a capability available to all Jamf customers that you can install. Now, certificates are great from a user experience standpoint because it eliminates the prompts, it eliminates the repeat passwords, or it further secures your workflow. And so that's what Joe's going to come up and talk about next, because these really do bridge that gap between, or that concept between user experience and making that great and seamless, while also being a more secure environment, which is kind of a win-win. So with that, Joe Bloom, thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. So I'll be taking you through a recap of some of the security and architectural things, but just to kind of go back to the whole story of provisioning and user experience, if we look at what Apple does and we look at what Jamf is trying to do to empower people with technology that puts humans first, a lot of that is really focusing on some of those barriers, and the barriers can be scalability, which is why I'm going to talk about architecture. And sometimes the barriers can be security, which is why I'm going to talk about security. But at the overarching level, you saw this in the keynote today, we're focused on making that Apple device something that is powerful for the end user so they can do their tasks and be very effective and be very happy with their device. And that's where the user experience comes in. So on the security side, one of the things that we announced last year was our integration with Intune for conditional access on Mac OS. This was a really big thing for us. It kind of kicked off a lot of the discussions that we had around security, but also that Jamf and story with the and being Microsoft. And in this case, for those who are not familiar with it, the way that this worked was Jamf was recognized, of course, as the management solution for that Mac, but we're able to integrate with Intune. So this is actually an Intune integration. There's two nice things about that. One is that Intune becomes where you get more data. So from just a reporting standpoint, you have a place where your compliance data resides, and that can be Intune. But the other nice thing about this is that it provides a place where all of the devices that need to fall into conditional access reside. So there's a sort of a central database as well for the conditional access piece, which is enforced by Azure Active Directory. So the user ends up with a device managed by Jamf. They register that device with Intune, and then that inventory data is shared so that Azure Active Directory can then do its job of evaluating compliance. And at the end of the day, what that means is that you get a trusted user, assuming that they can correctly log in. We saw a lot of examples of how to implement now some new multi-factor into your workflows and things like that, but then also that trusted device. And Jamf becomes that authority on ensuring that that device is configured appropriately for the end user so that they don't fall into a state where they're not compliant, but also we tied in some workflows with self-service so that if they fell out of compliance, they could get remediated and then be back into a nice known state. So this was the Mac OS side of things. We have introduced on the iOS side a direct integration with Azure AD. We put that out as a preview to start getting some feedback. And now we're going to be working on the iOS solution along with Microsoft to provide a more comprehensive solution for all your Apple devices to have this same kind of workflow. So a teaser of some of the things that we're looking at moving forward. And we introduced patch management in the 9 series, but one of the big steps that we did in 10 last year was introduce the patch policy. The patch policy was a net new way of deploying packages that are updated. And again, this falls into security really because once you have that package pushed down, we know that you might need to update those for security reasons. One of the things that we did after the 10 series was we took the patch policies and what we had in place, and we extended support beyond just the curated Jamf packages. So we had, I think, 20, 30 titles that you could report on and then patch. We opened that up to external sources, so then there were things that you could patch that you knew about, that were in-house apps or other applications. And then that also allowed us to extend the framework to other community sources. Now, I know that there are still some things you have to implement to make this work, so you might be using Autopackager and the JSS importer to complete the whole workflow. There's the need for a patch server and things like that. We're continuing to look really closely at patch. We know that there are 2 directions really that things are going, and some apps are going more into the App Store, so there's different ways of looking at your app deployments and updating those apps. But we do recognize that there's still that need for the core way of kind of traditionally packaging and deploying. And so we're looking at that. We're paying attention to kind of what are the next things that we should do in the patch world, because we know that we're not done yet. What we've done at this point is give you sort of the framework, but we need to flesh that out. Another real highlight of the Jamf and story is our partnership with Cisco. And Tim Cook announced the Cisco Security Connector back at Cisco Live. This was a really big win on the iOS side from a security standpoint, because now businesses finally had the ability to see the network traffic coming from iOS devices and potentially block malicious sites. So this was a really big win on the iOS side of security, but also then by virtue of our partnership, of course, we were able to bring this to market so you have this solution on your iOS devices that are managed by Jamf. So really big win for that community. That takes me in then to some of the Apple things that you've seen. So on the Apple side, what I really love about the way Apple treats security is they maintain that end user focus. So you see that the focus becomes the person with the device and making them powerful, doing it in a very transparent way. So the authority resides in that person and they know what's going on. User-approved MDM enrollment is a really good example of that, where it puts the enrollment and that knowledge of what's going on, this is a managed device, it puts that approval in the hands of the user so they understand what that device is doing and what it's capable of and also how it's being managed. Now, it's certainly not supervision for iOS on the Mac side. It's not the same thing. But the good thing about user-approved MDM is once you have that verified approved enrollment, you can do more in managing that device. A really good example of that is Kex, which I'll talk about in a second. Now, when we did user-approved MDM, we just had to make a few changes, so you'll notice that the workflow for deploying that is slightly different. Now you do the MDM profile, you get the quick add package, and the Jamf agent. Another really wonderful thing that we did, though, is to get that user-approved MDM enrollment, we made sure that we had some remediation. So self-service, of course, is the place where we want to empower the person even further, whether that's apps and other activities, but remediation and approvals is another place where we can leverage self-service. So if somebody was not in a state where they had approved the MDM enrollment, we have this remediation step. It's a simple pop-up with instructions so that that user can get themselves into a good spot, and then you have that user-approved MDM. One of the things that unlocks is the ability to do more with kernel extensions. So we know that Apple is continuing to harden the operating system and provide additional security. Again, one of the things that does is enhance the overall security profile of the Mac. In this case, we know that you also need to be able to use and approve kernel extensions for some of those business-critical applications. So we included this configuration profile for that purpose. And then most recently, you saw with Mojave some of the privacy policies that are going on, and that, again, it provides that end user with some control over what the device is able to do, what applications have access to what parts of the operating system, different utilities. So this you'll see coming out as part of allowing you to give approval to certain apps, give them behavior, whitelist things, so that those can all continue to function the way you would expect them to. That takes me in then to the cloud side of things. We did hear a little bit in the keynote about cloud, but I think it's important to recognize that at this point, throughout 2018, what we've seen is 85% of new customers with Jamf are going to the cloud. It's growing very, very rapidly, and we're continuing to see that adoption over time. And at this JNUC, the wonderful thing is that we can say for the first time, over 50% of our customers have deployed with us in Jamf Cloud. That's a really remarkable thing. If you think about a year ago, I think we were around 35%. Before that, 2 years ago, it was about 20%. So we've seen a lot of adoption. We're now over 50%. And there's over 4 million devices that are in Jamf Cloud on Jamf Pro alone. Not to mention that we have Jamf Now as well, which is a multi-tenant cloud offering. And you throw in all those devices. We have been really striving towards a scalable architecture, a really robust cloud solution, so we can take that infrastructure burden away. Now, what did we do? This first part is a retrospective. So one of the things we launched was Jamf Premium Cloud. For those who don't know about Premium Cloud, we really designed this because we knew that the standard Jamf Cloud offering wouldn't be something that everybody would want to adopt. We needed a little bit more flexibility. So with the Premium Cloud offering, what we give is the ability to choose when to upgrade, right? Simple thing like change control processes that you need to go through. So we need to recognize those and understand that you want to update when it's important to you. We are updating the Jamf Pro software a lot more frequently. You'll notice that we did a release about every 6 weeks in 2018. We're going to step that up. We're going to have smaller releases about every 4 weeks in 2019. But that means that the quality of those releases will be higher because we have smaller content, but also means you have to worry about when to upgrade. Now, if you're on standard cloud, we'll just upgrade you. You don't have to worry about it. And on the premium cloud side, then you get the control back. Check out the release notes, look at the things that are in that release, and we'll help you decide when it's appropriate for you to upgrade. The other things with the premium cloud offering really fall into some of the security aspects, which is where we get IP address whitelisting, so who can access Jamf Pro, restricting it to certain IP addresses. The ability to use custom ports, third-party certs, all of which allows you to control a little bit more of that infrastructure. And we're going to look at that offering as a place to provide additional customization so that you can have a Jamf Pro instance where you offshore the infrastructure to us, but you can still connect in the way that you want to your internal components. We did also expand our hosting. So right now we have the US, we have Germany, we have Australia, and Japan. We're going to continue to look at our hosting overall to help you grow. I'm not sure how many of you have global organizations, but we understand that the ability for us to provide a solution within each geography is very important. And that leads me into the foundational elements of Jamf Pro, which is overall stability. Now, we've done a lot, and I'll tell you a little bit later about some of the things that are coming in the future, but What we've been working on are some of the sort of low-hanging fruit of things that we know are potential impact to your overall performance. So in the 10.1 release, we released a refactor of smart groups. We took smart groups and we took it apart, put it back together in a way that would be more performant. That resulted in calculations basically going 7 to 10 times faster than they used to on mobile devices. That was what we saw with 10.1. And we just released in 10.7 the same thing for computers. So if you're doing a lot with smart groups on computers, if you haven't gone to 10.7 yet, you'll see a 7 to 10x improvement in the overall performance of smart group calculations. That's something that we've seen a huge benefit from. We have a handful of customers that have provided direct feedback after upgrading to let us know that they're seeing that impact. So it's very important to us that we can deliver that benefit. And it, of course, it helps us in the cloud, but it also helps you if you're doing it in a private cloud yourselves or if you're hosting it on-prem. These are solutions that you'll benefit from as well. We continue to also work on the performance of the database. Things like caching and just overall database performance is an area that we've been focused on. And we're looking at overall modularization of the software. Now, this gives you a couple of different things. One is scale, because if we break out a component, now we can monitor it more closely. We can redesign it in a way that is more performant. Also, we can then potentially release it differently and out of cadence with the whole core software. So as we get into those designs, it gives us a lot more flexibility, and it allows you to know what's going on when you upgrade. Again, ultimately, this goes towards performance. So look for things like the speed and the performance of MDM actions queuing up. So for people in K-12 at the beginning of the year, where you have a bunch of devices being provisioned, that's a problem we want to help you solve so that that all happens. It happens quickly. It's predictable. That's why we're going through and re-architecting those elements. Now, I also want to mention the Jamf API, because the Jamf API, although it's an API, it also has some performance impact, and that is reflected in the user interface. So the user interface itself, you might not see a change. It might look exactly the same, but behind the scenes, we've redesigned pages, and we're continuing to go through and redesign those pages to use the Jamf API, and that gets us performance gains in how the system actually performs to an end user who's using Jamf Pro. So actual UX improvements, but also performance improvements. Some other areas that we've been working on are InnoDB. So if you have not converted to InnoDB yet, we do have a tool. It's a command line interface that will help you go from MySAM to InnoDB. You get some performance impact from doing that, but we also just know that that's the direction we want to take it. From a cloud standpoint, that also allows us to use RDS, and an Amazon tool, for the overall database management. And of course, just kind of keeping the lights on, Java upgrades, Tomcat upgrades, all of those upgrades, all of those things go toward improvement of not just security. We recently did a Tomcat upgrade for a security reason, but also then we get the performance of those, and a lot of times that upgrade does give you a performance impact as well. Now, I'll talk a little bit later about some of the data things going on, but we're also working on data enhancements that make the database more performant. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Garrett, and Garrett's going to just do a recap here of what we've done over the last year, so you can see not just thematically, the user experience, security, and architecture, but also just the point releases that we've done over the last year.
Cool. Well, thanks, Joe. I've done a lot of hand-raising exercises. You're getting tired. I'm going to do one more. Would you just raise your hand if you're a part of the global Jamf nation? Everybody in the room, right? And here's what I love about this slide. What we're going to walk through is what we've done since the 10 series launched, and we are all in this together. And you're going to see in your organizations, whether you're commercial or education, really large enterprise, really truly small business, that there are things that apply to you and your org in this roadmap. And that's what's so exciting about what we're doing with the 10 series. You'll hear something like a refactor of smart groups. And again, larger, medium-sized to large deployment, right? If you're in that enterprise space and you've seen that slow down in the past, now it's faster, that speaks to you. If you're brand new and you're saying, hey, we're in maybe hospitality and we're starting to deploy tvOS because we're hearing that from our customer base, that speaks to you in a different way. So with that, let's walk through this together just briefly and talk about what we've done over the past year with our roadmap. So of course, Q4 2017, we debuted the Jamf Pro 10 series after a long period of anticipation. It was really great to get this out the door. Brand new UI, patch management functionality, and of course, macOS self-service and Microsoft Intune. You've heard about those, of course, for 12 months, and that's still something, like we heard in the keynote this morning, that we're building on going forward into the future. In quarter one, we had 10.2, external patch sources was added. And again, this was kind of a nice kickoff to the 2018 year. You'll see only one release in this quarter, but it really set the stage for what comes next. Quarter two, 2018, we had 10.3, 10.4, 10.5. This speaks directly to what Joe was talking about a minute ago with those kind of 6-week release cadence windows, right? And again, if that gets faster heading into 2019 like we plan it will, that's something you're going to see much more of. Apple Spring Release, we are always on top of that. We have been. Premium Cloud, and of course, iOS self-service. That was a really big addition for a lot of you that rely on those iOS devices. Again, much more specific use cases. You're enabling people to be in the field. You're enabling students in the classroom. Whatever that use case is, iOS self-service was a really big and significant addition. Quarter three, this of course just wrapped up. This is very recent in our rearview mirror, but we added the Apple Fall release. That was a really big undertaking, a really big effort. If you watched our social channels, if you watched our website, you saw the release communications around that. Activation lock enhancements, this is a really interesting one. I want to just pause and talk about this. If you take advantage of activation lock today, or you don't, and you've kind of thought about it and thought, I've heard of that technology, we don't enforce it, we don't use it, we're not really sure, do I need to wipe and re-enroll to take advantage of activation lock? With the additions in 10.7 and 10.7.1, you no longer need to wipe and re-enroll those devices to enable activation lock on that device. Take a look at that. We have a lot of documentation, again, on our blog, on docs.jamf.com, or talk to us afterward. But that was a really major step forward for those kind of security-minded organizations, which frankly, again, is all of us. It's the entire nation of Jamfs globally. Now, Q4. 10.8 is right around the corner. This is launched as of the keynote this morning. Cloud upgrades, you'll see this on our release communications, begin this weekend. So for standard cloud, the upgrades will begin, I believe, Friday evening. And again, if you're on premium cloud or if you're on-prem, might be a little bit of a different cadence there, but this is here. And we're very, very excited about what's contained in 10.8. So look at your emails. We've got communications out to all customers. Also look at, of course, again, docs.jamf or our blog. We've got more information there. So I want to bring this home. We're going to look to the future in a minute, and Joe has already done a great job previewing what's coming. We've got a few more previews that he'll walk through in a minute, but I want you to think about this. This is not just a marketing slide. This is not just, you're at JNUC slide. This is the core to what we're doing here, and it's really the core to why we all show up and why you all show up at your organizations and why we're building this thing together. What are we trying to accomplish? And I think this ties right back to that purpose and mission statement that we started the talk with here today. Take this home and talk to people. When they're saying, what in the world is this Jamf thing that you're trying to deploy? You're either asking for budget or support or executive support and buy-in for whatever you're trying to do, or you're talking to an end user and they're seeing that brand or they're seeing that logo somewhere, and you're talking about this tool that you use or are going to use. Talk about this. The goal of this company is to empower people. That's the ultimate goal of everything we're doing here, empowering people with technology that puts humans first. And at the very core of that, of course, is the Apple experience. We've been doing this since day one. We never changed the strategy. In the entire arc of that Jamf history, it's been Apple-focused, and it still is going forward into the future. And these three buckets, again, this was the smaller arc of 2018, provisioning, security, and architecture. We're already working on, and have been for a while, the roadmap for 2019. Joe will talk about that. We've got new buckets. Some of these returning, some are brand new. But again, we're really excited to kind of think of the broad themes of how we improve your quality of life as the users of Jamf Pro and the 10 series specifically. So with that, Joe?
Thank you, Garrett. All right, so I'll walk you through the themes that we're looking at from a 2019 standpoint. And there's 7 themes that I'm going to talk about. You could really boil all of those up into the big 3 that we were just talking about, but I thought it was more important to look at them in a little bit more granular view. So, of course, Day Zero support is core to what Jamf does. You can expect that. We'll be talking about that again next year. It's what we do. It's the cost of doing business for a company like us. We want to make sure that you can get everything out of the Apple operating systems as soon as they're available. Now, what does this mean for us? This means that we're actually working on architecturally some things that make it easier for us to deliver this. So some of the things that we'll be doing next year, and we're working on right now, is redesigning the way that configuration profiles work behind the scenes and the way that MDM actions work behind the scenes. Again, it's some of those components that we know we can make scale better. We can improve the quality of those, but also it's then easier for our teams to work on those and get them into your hands faster. So all of those are wins. So it's more than just the fact that we're going to try to deliver day zero support for Apple operating systems. There's a lot of work actually that falls in this bucket that you won't even know about that's happening that ultimately means quality, scalability, and timely delivery. Jamf Cloud is, again, another thing that we're going to be focused on. Like I said, over 50%, over 4 million devices now in Jamf Cloud. Now, what does this mean for you? What this means for you is that as we look at the overall performance of the system, as we look at the tools that we can employ, you're going to see more kind of hybrid solutions, more ways that we kind of try to bridge that gap of knocking down barriers for you in the cloud. So we did SOC 2, and that was great. There's some things that don't mean a real product change. Maybe it's a But if it breaks down a barrier for you with cyber or InfoSec, that's a win for us. We want to make sure that all of the components that you need to go cloud are there so that you can make that adoption happen. The other thing that we're looking at, of course, is provisioning. So we've seen a few examples of the upcoming things in 10.8 and 10.9. Some of those workflows that you can use to deploy Jamf Connect and packages, configuration profiles during the setup process and before the setup process. That's very important to us. There's other things that we're looking at doing that are very specific, not just to the macOS deployment, but also the way that you can interact with iOS devices. There's another session where we'll be introducing a couple of apps that really go towards purpose-built solutions, right? How do you empower somebody with technology that's Apple technology that puts the user first? It's giving them more control over how that device is configured. So if you have a shared device, you don't necessarily need to know exactly what that device is going to look like. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing some work to push down the configuration to the end user so they can make some selections and choose how that device should behave. Just make it easier for you to drop ship a bunch of iPads to a location and say, here you go. You said you needed 1,000 of them. There's 3 configurations. Make them whatever you want. Those are one example of how we're looking at shared devices and the whole process of provisioning of provisioning and reprovisioning. End user empowerment, again, is one of the big pieces. So when I think end user empowerment, I think about that keynote where we showed you Engage, where we have those little pop-ups to walk you through net new features. There's a lot of things that we can do with that. You saw a link back to release notes. Well, imagine that we have an egregious product issue that we need to communicate. Well, we can actually put that right in the product as well. So there's a lot of applications for that. We know that communication is a big thing. Sometimes it's a product change, yes, but a lot of times it's just communicating better with the community about the state of the product, the quality of the product, known product issues, and how you can know about them before you suffer the impact of that. That's one way that we empower end users. The other is the actual person with the device. That's self-service, right? So we did iOS accessibility changes. We're working on macOS accessibility changes. We're looking at how to make self-service part of that everyday process. Yes, it's an app store, but what if it can do more? What if it allows you to request an application from IT? What if it allows you to do IT interactions for help desk, right? There's ways you can do that today. You can do a bookmark for, file a Jira Service Desk ticket or a ServiceNow ticket, right? So there's some capability there, but we know we can enhance that so it's really a part of your organization, and it makes that end user really powerful. The other thing that I mentioned is the accessibility piece. Like I said, on the self-service side, we're looking at macOS accessibility. We're still iterating through iOS. That will continue to be a theme. And then that carries into the other areas of the product, including Jamf Pro itself, and making that more usable. On the security side, you'll see, like I said, we're continuing to work with Microsoft on a lot of the conditional access workflows. I know that if you've tried it, there's a lot of login. You have to enter your username and password. You'll see some examples of what we're doing this week to make that process more streamlined. At the end of the day, if you look at what Jamf Connect does, it allows you to get that login, and once you have that login completed, leverage that credential, whether it's a token or it's another mechanism, to log into the other applications, right? SAP's workflow on iOS with all their in-house apps leveraging the certificate, so you don't have to log in multiple times. It's a wonderful way of empowering the end user, but doing it in a secure way. We'll also be looking just foundationally at the architecture, so things like database encryption, things like networking strategies. Security is a really big focus for us. Now, on the conditional access side, of course, we've talked a lot about Microsoft, but it's worth mentioning that we have similar workflows for Okta. where Okta establishes device trust. So if you're an Okta shop, there are ways of implementing device trust. So again, that user at the point of login, if they're not on a device that's trusted, can be kind of rejected, so they can get onto a compliant device. That's really big. We want to make sure that whatever data they're exchanging is being done with an endpoint that you trust. So establishing that trust is important. We do that with Microsoft, we do that with Okta, and we're talking with Google about things like secure LDAP. We have a session on Thursday where we'll be talking about secure LDAP, and that kicks off some of the Jamf and stories that we also have as we look at what we can do with Google as well. Because we know that certain organizations are adopting that as an identity provider, and so we have to, in the spirit of Jamf and, integrate with all the things, and that includes Google. Lastly, I'll talk a little bit about scalability. I mentioned some of this before, right? So configuration profiles, MDM work. But the other thing is, like I said, smart groups. We've done computers, we've done mobile devices. We still need to do users. The other thing that I'll note is performance impact of the database. So in the very near future, in 10.8 and 10.9, you will see some changes that impact the database. Your applications table is likely to shrink from 20 to 40% as we make some changes there. We're also looking at just overall connections and making sure that we can leverage the database in the most optimal way. So you'll see a lot of performance improvements in the database. Look for that. 10.9 is probably where you can expect to see a lot of that performance gain. So really excited about that. That's something that we know is going to help everybody. Again, cloud or on-prem, you'll benefit from that. That being said, I'm gonna wrap it up. We'll take some questions now from the audience. I do know that it's noon right now. So if you want to get some food and you're hungry, that's great. But if you want to stick around and ask questions, we'll do that. You can also approach us after the session as well individually.